Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Ms. Hewlett. Now I have the distinct pleasure of taking questions from the audience for my panel. I see Ms. Cardi here. There you go. Watch it. Attorney Jennings is walking around, so if someone has a question, he'll get to you. Ms. Cardi, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Good morning. Hello? Okay. Yeah, good morning. A very excellent presentation by our panel. I'd just like to preface my question to Senator Malone before I get to him. At the legislature, when I came back from college, there was where I worked, and there were a tremendous amount of barriers. I was there last week and noticed a great improvement. So what I wanted to find out is the legislature building now fully ADA compliant?
Well, accessibility, well, Stephanie Barnes, she's working very closely with my executive director and some appointed personnel who are being trained in this area to continue our progress, as I alluded to become compliant with the ADA law, and of course, anything else that would be needed to do to make the legislature more accessible physically as well as, through, communication means. So Stephanie can be more specific, but we certainly have, and you said you've noticed the changes, but we continue to do so. The most recent renovation at the Senate widened the doors of the bathrooms and put the necessary support in the restrooms so that persons who are in wheelchairs or otherwise can get in. And on the first floor, we have ramps, both St. Croix and St. Thomas. We have an issue in St. John though, with this complex. There's an elevator, but there's a staircase that's pretty narrow. And we have a back entrance that we just got the gate finally secured so that we have addressed the issues at St. John. But I think St. Croix, we have a ramp, elevator, everything works. The one that's not working, we move very quickly to repair them. But like I said before, we're trying to do other things, like those who are watching the hearings or viewing them. We would like to be able to have the closed captioning and the sign language interpreter on television so that everyone can follow what we're doing.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay, I work at Snyder Regional. I have some issues. Number one is with the restroom where I work. The scooter cannot get in there. And I want to know if they have to fix it or just ignore whatever's going on in there, because I have to go all the way out in the lobby to use the restroom, and by the time I reach, I don't mess up myself. There's nobody to help me, and to me, I feel uncomfortable. I need somebody to answer that question for me.
That question was asked about a year ago, and no one has addressed it.
Thank you. I just want, what is your name? Ms. Larson, and the other members of our community, listening community, who are employees with disabilities in the territory. Just want you all to know, I said earlier that I will give you information on what is currently being done through my office. Just recently, the 107 coordinators were trained, departmental coordinators were trained for a reason. They were trained in a federally mandated self-evaluation and transition plan that the government must conduct. It is called a 3-year self-evaluation and transition plan. So the federal government, and Attorney Hewlett is right, it is enforced by the U.S. Department of Justice. The law stipulates that the government of the Virgin Islands and any local or state government must conduct a self-evaluation. So I'm going to tell you what's going to happen at Snyder Regional Hospital. Snyder Regional Hospital will be conducting a self-evaluation of their programs, their services, and these are access to the programs and services, access to communication, access to their facilities, and I'm going to tell you, they're going to start from the outside, because you can have a compliant bathroom, but if they cannot get in to use the bathroom, it makes no sense, right? So the law stipulates that you start removing barriers from the outside, the entrance, to the inside. So we provide access in from outside to inside. We will be assessing all these areas. There is a checklist, and the various entities in the government are currently conducting surveys of their building. So Snyder Regional Hospital, coming soon for you, will be a bathroom accessible for your wheelchair. I am telling you, if they have to break down 2 bathrooms to make one accessible bathroom, the checklist at the end of the day will allow them to see the inconvenience that is being caused. And I laud you for your perseverance and your tolerance, and I applaud you for bringing that up here today so that I can make sure that I call them tomorrow and let them know that they have an employee with a disability who is being discriminated against. Well, now they're going to know again.
Ms. Barnes, if I hear you correctly, next year when we have Voices That Counts, this will not be another question. Because this is the second year in the street this young lady has asked that question.
Well, let's say this, ma'am. A transition plan is a matrix of work need to be done, okay? And what I will suggest, because we have employees with disabilities in the territory who must be provided access in around their workspace, I will let you know that I will stay on Snyder Hospital to provide you with access into a restroom. I am telling you, it is about dignity. This is why we do what we do. It is not just about the right thing to do. It is the law. And it provides for dignity. And you are an independent employee just as I am, and should have access to a restroom. I promise you that I will not let up. I am not a politician, and I am not trying to seek anyone's vote. So you have my word, and everyone in here who knows me, I do what I say I am going to get done. Okay?
Also, in conjunction with that, everyone here, for self-advocacy purposes, must be aware that a lot of these government ADA coordinators are calling for people to come and evaluate what the work they're doing. Now, we used to have an ADA ad hoc committee that was very active and did that in the earlier years before the DeYoung administration came on board. But what we need are volunteers who are willing to go to the locations and say, this works, this doesn't work, and it only comes from people who have a disability that can really give that final evaluation. So Beryl, I welcome you to join along with the ADA Ad Hoc Committee. It's going to go through the Disabilities, Developmental Disabilities Council. Call the executive director there, call our offices, and sign up as a volunteer.
Give her the number, please.
Actually, I don't know for the DD Council. You can reach the DD Council Executive Director at 773-2323, extension 2137. You can reach our offices at 776-4303 to get on this, basically a panel to evaluate the actual work in place to see if it fits or works with, removing the barriers or removing the obstacles.
The numbers again slowly so you can write it down.
773-2323, extension 2137. You're trying to reach Executive Director Yvonne Peterson, or just call our offices to get on the list at 776-4303.
This question is for Ms. Hewlett. Ms. Hewlett, how does someone file an actual complaint with your office, and how do they go about checking to see if your office have done anything about it.
Our telephone number is 774-5757, and all you need to do is call. You don't have to put anything in writing. You can call us and tell us what your concern is. What we would do is we would then invite you to come in if you're unable to provide as much information over the phone, and then we would actually sit down with you and do an interview of you. Or we can come where you are and we will interview you and get all of the details. We would do an investigation. We would go to the site. For example, if we wanted to go to the hospital, we would go to the hospital and we would check out that restroom and we would measure it. And part of our investigation involves measuring and taking photos just to make sure that it complies. So because there's certain dimensions, the door frame must be a certain width, the toilet, the stuff in the toilet paper must be a certain height. The seat, so there's some things must have enough space so that you can go in with a wheelchair and turn around, be able to turn around. So there are a number of things that we know what to check for. The Department of Justice has a number of investigators, they're architects and other ADA specialists, and they would periodically come to the Virgin Islands. As I said, we had one here as recently as last month, traveling throughout the Virgin Islands, doing investigations. We don't always rely on them, obviously, because they can't come as often as we would like. So we also are able to go ourselves and sometimes conduct investigations. So something as simple as a restroom at a hospital, we will be able to go and just do that, do the measurements, take the photos, we'll send it up to the architect, and then she will do the evaluation and say, okay, this is what's wrong with it, and this is what needs to be done. Then we would send what's called a violation letter to the hospital, for example, and we would say, this is what we conduct an investigation based on a complaint, and here are the violations. You're in violation of X, Y, and Z of the ADA, and this is what you need to do. And we usually tell you what you need to do. Not how you're going to get it done, because there are different ways to do things, but we're going to tell you what needs to be done. And so they need to comply with that, and we give them a certain time to respond. As I said, because in most instances, the violations are pretty obvious. It's not something you can challenge, like, oh, we are in compliance. No, it's just a matter of how can we get into compliance and how soon. And so so they would normally respond. Some people would hire an attorney. Some people would get an ADA specialist, their own specialist, who would come in and help them, assist them in complying as well. And then, of course, we would keep the complainant, let them know what progress we are making. And then at the end, once we've resolved that case, we will send a complaint, because we'll open a case, then we'll send a complaint, letting them know it has been resolved, and letting them know that we are closing our file of that case because it has been resolved.
Remind them what office you're with.
I'm with the Office of the U.S. Attorney, and you can reach us at 774-5757 if you need to file any complaints.
Next question.
Before you ask a question, can I just let everyone know, on behalf of the government of the Virgin Islands, I just want you to know we have a grievance and complaint procedure. We would prefer to vet our own complaints, and every departmental, you have a departmental ADA coordinator. You do. Speak to your departmental ADA coordinator. Your departmental ADA coordinator knows that the bathroom should be 32 inches wide. The door passage should be 32 inches wide. Your turnaround should be 60 degrees in diameter. He should know that because I trained him. Okay? We also know that the mirror and any features in the bathroom has to be at least, at minimum, 40 inches off the floor. We know this because I train them. I can tell you exactly how many feet your bathroom toilet seat should be because I train them. So you contact your departmental ADA coordinator before you call the Justice Department. Please don't do that.
Ms. Barnes.
Well, we got a question right here.
Yes. Next question.
Sumas. It's you.
Oh,
No. It's Marty Sumas.
of course. Okay, I asked.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosemary Sumas. I'm the Executive Director of the VI Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities Inc., St. Thomas, also Dow Aride. Picking back on Beryl's complaint, this has been an ongoing situation, and I'm trying to get a clarification from what Ms. Barnes was saying about they do have an accessible bathroom, but her problem is this is so far from where her station is that by the time she gets there, she messes on herself. I've been in contact with them. Center for Independent Living has been in contact with them. And of course, as you said, they have the ADA compliant person there on staff, but no one's actually taking this on. Also, Beryl is on part-time, okay? And she's not as a regular employee. And her fear has been what could happen to her as far as them taking off of the position that she has, because she used to work in the mailroom, and then he moved her from the mailroom to the laundry. So Beryl's been with them for a while, and she's been having the same complaint. This isn't something that's new from last year or the year before that. Beryl, how long have you been working at the hospital now?
The hospital for 5 years.
Don't leave. Can I answer?
Thank you.
I would. Okay, so I was not aware that if there is a compliant restroom, that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
There is a compliant restroom, so that is not the issue. The issue is reasonable accommodations.
Yes.
That's the flip side to what you were saying. I thought we were trying to get an accessible restroom. What we need to do, I want to commend Snyder Hospital for promoting you. I want to commend Snyder Hospital for promoting you, because that is a big barrier in employment for people with disabilities. We give them a job and then we do not promote them, nor do we compensate them correctly. So I commend Snyder Hospital for moving you up. I also will speak to the ADA coordinator, because now this is a matter of reasonable accommodations. This is not a matter of an accessible restroom. I thought that when you were talking about a restroom that there were no restrooms. Okay, so what we need to do for you is find an office closer to the restroom. This is what you want, and that is called reasonable accommodations, and I will speak to the ADA coordinator to that, okay?
Well,
welcome.
I think it's more than her. She wanted accessible people like her. And one of the things she didn't say, which I know she wanted to say, is that there's a fear of retaliation. After you complain enough, then people start to retaliate against you. And she's saying, look, I am a sole person. I am happy for the job and the opportunity, but I need to be treated with respect. And if I keep demanding respect, I know what's going to happen.
Retaliation is against the law. It's written right there in the ADA.
We know it's against the law, and that's why me and Archie filed so much lawsuits. But it happens. That's what we're saying.
Agencies that say they help the disabled, half of them just want paying for themselves. Because I just come from Orlando, and let me tell you, Orlando is very much accessible compared to St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. Every place you go, there's a button to push. All I'm telling them is put on a button, so when I reach to my job, I don't have to go on the second floor and then go in the elevator and then punch one and go down. No stress.
Next question.
May I say something? Huh? Oh, okay. Yeah, the question that I have, I think it's the attorney had mentioned something about Section 2 and whatnot of the ADA Act. I would like to know, in terms of the ADA, which entities are mandated under the law to do certain things and which entities are exempted. Do we have any entities that are exempted from the ADA?
I'll let Attorney Hewlett continue.
The remedies available to the department. The remedies that are available to us depend on whether or not the structure, the building, was built before the ADA or after the ADA. We refer to that as pre-ADA, and the ADA was passed in 1990. It was amended several times after that time. So pretty much what we have is newly constructed places of public accommodation. So new buildings, they must be compliant. You can't build a new building right now and not have an elevator, but you have a second floor level. If it's new, it must be compliant. It has to comply with the ADA. If it's a building that was built pre-ADA, but you're making changes to it, you're altering that building, then it also has to be readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities to the maximum extent feasible. Now, for buildings constructed pre-ADA, that is before 1990, and I'm going to use the legal term here. It says architectural barriers to accessibility should be removed if it is readily achievable. And that's what sometimes you will recall that I gave some examples where we had to come up with some creative solutions. And that's because the architectural barriers that were there and that were making it inaccessible, those barriers, in order for us to remove them, and if we could remove them, it just was not readily achievable. And sometimes that happens, as I talked about in Frenchtown. We also had entered into an agreement with the tramway, making that accessible for persons with disabilities so that anybody can get a ride on the tramway. But if you go to the very top of the tramway, once people get off, to get them down to Paradise Point, at some point it just was not architecturally feasible to do some of those things. Now, if it was pre-ADA, it was built pre-ADA, and I think that's part of the problem, then, if it's not readily achievable, then there is nothing we can do. That's all the law allows us to do. But if it's new construction, then, we can be as aggressive as we can and say you must comply because that's new construction. But even though we can, well, with new construction, yes, we are. We are very aggressive. But sometimes with the readily achievable, and even with the altered facilities like Bluebeards, they were making some alterations to Bluebeards. We still try to work with businesses because it can be very expensive, as I said, and we don't want to put people out of business. We have to try, there's sort of like a balance that we try and maintain, just because to install an elevator, to put lifts on every single level, and it can be very expensive. And so there's a balance that we try to maintain.
Follow-up question, one quick second. The follow-up question that I have now is the new library over at 22. Is that, sorry. Okay, the question that I have, you said now definitely the library building is after the ADA. The new library in 22, I think it's called the Turnbull Library, is that ADA compliant?
We have not investigated that building. I have not even been to that building myself personally, so I don't know. But I would presume that is a new building, so that would definitely be in compliance with the ADA because that building is brand new, so it should be. And if it isn't, it has to be.
Oh, one other area was the historical districts. There is an exemption for historical districts that they don't have to completely comply with the ADA, and there's some accommodations that could be made when there's buildings in the historical district. Matter of fact, when we had to go through the Historical Preservation Committee to work out those accommodations.
Next question.
Churches are exempt.
Good morning. This question is for Senator Malone. Do you have a list of agencies that provide services for persons with disabilities?
That won't be a legislative question. That should be more of a
General question?
no. It should be more of an administrative question.
Right.
Administration.
We could get it, but I'm sure Ms. Barnes can assist responding to that question about what agencies have services available for persons with disabilities. Off the top of my head, I know Public Human Services is one that they do a lot of work. For example, the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation assists persons with devices and with assistive technology to assist you in getting a job. There are nonprofits who do a lot of work with the disabled community, like the organization in the Whitney Center. I've got the names. The name don't come to me right off the top of my head. But thank you very much. The Association for the Independent Living.
Yeah, I think.
Others like that.
Let me jump in. Dr. Hopkins, we have such a list that has those agencies that provide services. Is that correct?
What kind of services?
Services to people with disability.
Yeah, we as you said, we do some training. The Disability Rights Center do some litigation.
Yes.
The DD Council also would do training. So I know at least the 3 sisters who are there to do to render services to people with disabilities.
Tell them the number they can reach for that information at some later point.
All right. And there's also a directory of community services that we use as far as making referrals. So if you have a question, if you call our agency at 776-4303, what we have set up is that information referral system to give you information as to what may be an agency or some service related to your question. So 776-4303, we also refer you to the DD Council in regard to those same issues.
And Archie, just so you know, Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands issues a green book of. The Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands has a green book. You can call the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands and they have a book available. And I think that's what you were asking there, Mom? Huh? And I call her Mom because she is one of my parents in my network. But if you call the Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands, they have such a book of all the nonprofit organizations, which also include organizations that advocate on behalf of people with disabilities, okay?
Next
I think
question.
that's what you were asking, right?
Yes.
Hi, Rosie Francis again. I have a question for Senator Malone. You talked about a new law. You said 20% for 20 years. If you do some changes in your home, is that a 20% total? You can claim over the 20. Can you just explain that? And then the second question was funds for structural changes, as in schools, trainings for support staff and teachers. I mean, other than the budget that each, let's say, education asks for, is there monies available to do things for structural changes that doesn't come out specifically on the, say, education's budget, and we're talking education, and so many of our schools have, like EBO is not accessible. I have a kid that broke his leg, missed school for several days because he couldn't go down the step with his crutches. So anyway, first the law, that new law, and funding for training and structural changes.
Thank you for your question, Rosie. The new law, amongst the biggest benefit, the biggest incentive is the 20% discount on your property taxes for 20 years. Once you have qualified as someone who has the plans to adjust or to make the home accessible to persons who have disabilities. The other benefit is that you'll receive, once they evaluate your need on a need basis, that would waive all the permit fees, application fees for permits to do the work in your home to make it visitable, is the word that we use in the law, but say accessible just for plain English. So those are two things. So take advantage of it. It just was implemented on October 1st. The department issued their press release after they've done the internal preparations to make it work and set up the rules and regulations and how to evaluate each application. So that's a big benefit for our community. The issue of funding for, let's talk about public buildings here with schools and government offices. That's something that would have to be advocated for by each commissioner when they come. One way at least is you come before the Senate during the budget hearings and you ask for funding for those things. I'm not aware if they've done it in this budget cycle, but usually whenever those occur, the Department of Public Works, who I understand under this administration, is charged with assisting all agencies with these types of construction activities. I believe I could better answer from Commissioner Smalls about how he works with agencies who have these needs that arise from time to time, because I can see that in some cases it will not be easy to forecast what you would need to budget for it, but as on a needs basis, then to make adjustments within the budget of Senate so that you know to assist agencies to be more flexible in implementing a lot of these changes, have allowed for what's called a lump sum budget this year. So it gives the agency heads the flexibility to move monies around. So in case something like this comes up, a student from someone becomes disabled in a way that you have to make some adjustments to his or her classroom, then money should be available through creative management of those funds to find the money, get the contract work issued so that we can have the changes done. That's the way I see it, Rosie.
While we have you standing, what legislation can we expect from the legislature that will assist individuals with disability?
I think we've done some major things already. The Visitable Act, and we changed the code to address the terms used to describe persons with disabilities. What I would like to see, and then also, by the way, I forgot to mention my presentation, and Stephanie reminded me, as it comes to employment, how Ms. Lawson was promoted at the hospital, which is great, is that we have to do, I believe we can do a lot more to incentivize businesses to hire persons with disabilities. There are a number of federal laws that are in the tax code that provides tax credits for persons who do this. And in fact, this week, I believe there is a program that the Department of Human Services Voc Rehab Division will have to honor businesses who have hired persons with disabilities. And we've provided information to them on all the federal tax credits that are available. I believe that once we find the means to do so, we could look at this, Attorney Rivers, as more ways to incentivize businesses to hire persons with disabilities, to include training, requirement for training, to get the breaks as we see the need to do so and can afford to do so, looking at our very scarce resources. But this is an area where I believe we could do a lot more work in. So we're actually looking at some of these opportunities right now.
Yes.
Earlier I saved a lot in my speech because there's so much being done in the government. The National Governors Association, this year, 2013, their mandate to all local and state government was to go back, and they were charged with an initiative of increasing employment for people with disabilities in their community. So the governor is on that committee, and he came back and he had meetings and conference calls with many of us, and he charged us with a very powerful charge that we have to do something about this. So Department of Labor, in collaboration with DHS, Voc Rehab, and my office, the Department of Labor took the charge and took the lead in establishing what is now called the Employment Disabilities Stakeholders Incentive Program. And one of the things that Commissioner Bryan did is Walgreens, as you may not know, is the world leader, corporate leader in hiring and have programs for people with disabilities. And that's why they're here. Believe it or not, there is such a thing called Walgreens University. And Walgreens University actually teaches people with disabilities various ways that they can be employed inside of Walgreens. So Walgreens is here, and that is something. I sat in a meeting with Albert Bryan and the corporate heads of Walgreens, how we can increase employment. We're all, as the senator said, this week, Voc Rehab, and that will be Wednesday on St. Thomas, right, Ms. Powell? Wednesday on St. Thomas is the luncheon for Voc Rehab, and that will go over to St. Croix, and I think it's Friday. But I'm going to tell you something. We have to, when we look holistically at change, we have to laud everyone for taking steps, because change is very difficult. But I laud education in their programs, the Career Academy program. That program in education allows young high school students with disabilities to afford them the opportunity, my friends, to go off to college. And I sit here and I tell you, I have seen success stories where our students are being placed in schools, they're being placed in colleges, they're being placed in programs throughout our territory. If you go into our hotels, you will find so many of our students with developmental disabilities working, and they're employable. And they're becoming employable because of that program, Career Academy, which actually puts them out to work. It's people like Gwendolyn Powell, who sits in this auditorium right now, that we should be lauding for the years and years of working for trying to get our youth employable with disabilities. And I commend you once again for your effort and what you have been doing, Ms. Powell. Thank you very much.
Two more questions from the floor.
Hi, good afternoon. This question again is for Honorable Senator Malone. Have you identified any funding source or sources to address drastic budget cuts of agencies that are providing services to persons with disabilities?
Yes, we have. In fact, so funny you mentioned this last night. Because you know the monies are scarce, and we are focusing on new revenues and ways to generate new money. And there will be, we passed a policy several years ago, Senator Rocky Liebert. But only now, after about a decade, we now see the opportunity for what's called internet gaming to be, it's been questioned whether it's legal or not, and so they've been going back and forth. They mean in the U.S. government, U.S. Justice Department, and all local government, and some governments in the states have been challenging this, and so there have been conferences I've attended, and we have people who in the Virgins have licenses to begin doing this. That will be a very reliable source of revenue that we will then reapportion to assist not just agencies to support persons with disabilities, but a number of other areas where we need funding, like our hospitals, a big area that we are looking at very closely where they in pretty much, let's say crisis, they have some serious financial problems. And our retirement system, those are some very serious issues, areas, that we're looking at directing some of these monies. And we're also looking at other types of new taxes, not so much on you and me, but cigarette tax, called sin taxes, is a proposal by one of my colleagues to increase revenues, the taxes for cigarettes, which we think will be harmless since that the cigarettes are already very cheap in the Virgin Islands. And even if we raise it by 2%, it'll still be a whole lot cheaper here than in the United States. So we could use this extra money to help support a lot of the much needed programs and just needs general of our population, to include persons with disabilities. And we're looking at even agencies. What I like to do is to support the nonprofits like the VI Independent for Association Living, who is on the front line constantly addressing a lot of issues that maybe human services cannot, and to support them in providing more services to persons with disabilities. So it's more accessible and it's less bureaucratic, for example.
This question is for Ms. Barnes. Ms. Barnes, as the Territorial ADA Coordinator at the Office of the Governor, how do you include the Department of Education, first, to understand its role vis-a-vis the children with disability? Secondly, what plans are on the books for full inclusion? And third, how can the public access the information on the plan, progress of this?
Can you repeat all of those?
Yes.
First question?
How do you include the Department of Education, first, to understand its role vis-a-vis children with disability?
Okay, I'll answer that question. 3 years ago, when I was appointed and accepted the role as the territorial ADA coordinator, the very first thing I did with the governor, right after he introduced me to his cabinet and showed me my office in Frederiksted, he called in the Commissioner of Education. Very few people noticed. And while everyone was eating, the governor sat down with myself and the Commissioner of Education, and he told both of us this: I want you both to fix special education in this territory. I want you to work and collaborate to fix it. At the time, I didn't know what I needed to fix, but I'm going to tell you that I have and will continue to be the voice for children in this territory with disabilities. I know from firsthand experience what good education for a child with disability is. So I am telling you that there are programs and services that are afforded children today in the Department of Education that I am certain, 100% certain, if it wasn't for my big mouth, that these children will not have those services. I visit classrooms and I isolate children. I have found children in our classrooms who have been sitting in the back of the classroom who were hearing impaired today to have the auxiliary aids needed to be mainstream into their school system. Parents, you know this to be true. Department of Education are sending away consistently every year our teachers to be more educated and able to teach children with various learning disabilities. Because 3 years ago when I came as the ADA coordinator, we had a high incident of children in our territory undiagnosed with autism. It has increased in numbers in diagnosis only because the Department of Education has set charge that yes, we know our limitations. We have a very good director, state director of special education. I am pleased to let you know that Jill Singer is now a member of the bar, the Virgin Islands Bar, and she has charged and changing, and she is really doing a good job, changing the way that it used to be. And she is following those laws and increasing the outcomes, the ultimate outcomes for our children with disabilities. Your second question?
Well, the question is how do you make them understand their role? And secondly, what plans are on the books for full inclusion?
It's easy to say how to make them understand their role. It is the law. The IDEA governs education, special education. That's where their funds come from. And with partnership with the State Director of Special Education, we know that we are moving ahead. Today, we don't see education in here, and I'll tell you why. They're currently in training at Frenchman's Reef, and part of their training is on special education and the laws thereof. I am telling you that change is not easy. It is not going to be done overnight. But as we move ahead, I know this to be true. In the 3 years that I have been the ADA coordinator, I have seen progress. I have seen progress in education. I have seen outcomes for our children with disabilities. And I'm going to tell you, in partnership with DHS and the Department of Education, everyone knows that I will not give up on our children. I am here to tell you that I have children in flight school who the Department of Education has given scholarships to go away to school. And these are children with autism. We are working very hard, but it's not, and I'm going to keep saying it, change does not happen overnight.
I have one last question.
And the third
here.
part of the question is, how can the public access information on the plan to know how it's going and who to call?
Parents.
Got one last question. We're going to try to wrap it up.
Let her go ahead.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. My name is Ingrid Carmona, and this question is for Senator Malone. When are you all going to build more sidewalks?
Thank you for your question. So a little quick civics lesson. The Senate appropriates the money and the Department of Public Works, implements it. But because we have elected called a 3-in-1 government, we do everything in the Senate, from build roads, potholes to pass major agreements. Nonetheless, the sidewalks, I agree with you. We see 2 projects going in that was advocated by my office. And it's unfortunate, though, that we have sometimes in some years of our government slow implementation of policies the Senate passes. One is the Bavoni sidewalk. Who can remember that the dollar taxis don't go into Bavoni, they stop at the non-intersection. There are many people who have to use public transportation to get to work, who that live in the Bavoni area, belong to over there, Bavoni. And they have to walk to Nada. And over the last several years, we've had 3 fatal incidents. 3. And 2 that we know of injuries, and many unreported. Because the people have to literally walk on the road from Bavoni housing, because there's a sidewalk from BCB school to the Bavoni housing entrance, but no sidewalk from Bavoni housing to Nada. So if you drive there now, you see the sidewalk being implemented from an appropriation of $500,000 that I passed, believe it or not, in 2006, 7. So it's been a while, but nonetheless, that's happening. The other one is down here, and I hate to say it, but it's all plainly in the Crown Bay area. Because we had the cruise ship dock down there now, we have the cruise ships coming in, tourists walking from Crown Bay up to town. You see the need to put a sidewalk in to accommodate the tourists. But it should have been one there anyway, for all of us who live here. So you have sidewalks be implemented down at Crown Bay. But it still needs a whole lot more to be done, because even in Tutu where I live, people walk from their homes down to Fort Wayne. I live in New Tutu. And there are no sidewalks at my house. There are guts for water to go when it rains, but there are no sidewalks. So if you want to drive to and from work in my neighborhood, I have to drive very carefully, because a lot of pedestrians who take their kids to either Ronaldo School or to Gomez. And so the difficulty in that case is I've been looking at it for quite some time, is how would you then do so when the project, the homes are literally built close to the road. There's no room to even put a driveway so the cars could park out of the street. And a number of issues there that will be expensive and extremely costly to fix. But I think in absence of the sidewalk, we should do some creative things, as Attorney Hewlett did point out, have a lot of signage, a lot more markers in the street. Maybe you probably apportion off like a striping, like some places do in the sense of bicycle paths on the road, and make the road a little smaller and have a place where people can walk. If you can't build a sidewalk, for example, with the proper markings, and that's something I've talked to Commissioner Smalls about, in areas, especially in St. Thomas, where it's difficult to build a sidewalk because of the existing development. So those are the 2 projects I know, and we're working, like I just said, in a creative way to address ways where pedestrians can be safe walking as much as possible by using street markers and signage.
Thank you, Senator Malone. We're going to ask the panel, each one to wrap up. They have 60 seconds to tell us anything they want.
Okay, I'll be very brief. I mean, this has been very informative. Thank you very much, Dr. Haptes, for having me here. I always love to come and engage and continue working on behalf of especially those of us who don't have that voice to help themselves with. I have to say, and I echo based on the discussion we had here with Attorney Hewlett and Ms. Bonds, that we have made some considerable progress since I've been in the Senate, at least, since she's been in the AD coordination, since the U.S. Attorney's Office with the work that they're doing to enforce laws. We see now much more sensitivity, more awareness, and of course, implementation of these things to assist and improve the quality of life for persons with disabilities. So, but of course, there's a lot more to be done, and I think that we are on track to getting us to, like, say, Ms. Larson pointed out, like Orlando, so that we can really be, we don't see a difference between the Virgin Islands and anywhere you would visit, where they're so much further ahead with accommodating persons with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now we hear from Attorney Hewlett, please. 60 seconds.
I just want to once again thank the university for giving us an opportunity to let you know some of the things that we are doing, and we really would appreciate it if you would let us know if you have any concerns, if you have any complaints, because we really want to ensure that everyone has equal opportunity and to do whatever it is you want to do. And that's the bottom line. That's why the law was passed back in 1990 and signed by George H.W. Bush. And since then, it has had a tremendous impact, and we know it's had an impact here in the Virgin Islands, and we just want to ensure that everyone benefits from that law. So if you know of anything, please call us. We are very able and willing to assist you in any way that we can.
Thanks. And Attorney Hewlett is a product of the University of the Virgin Islands. Imagine that.
That is correct. And we did enforce against UVI. I'm sure everyone now knows, and it is very accessible. Anyone can come to this university now and go all over the campus.
And now we'll hear from Ms. Barnes. 60 seconds.
You like how he said 60 seconds? Because they know I like to talk. I just want to thank the University of the Virgin Islands. I want to thank Dr. Haptis, Dr. Chuck Beatty. I want to thank you. I want to thank the collaboration that sits here today, because this is an example of community. We cannot do it alone. With the help of the U.S. Department of Justice, with the monies appropriated by the legislature, with your cries and your continuous support for the Americans with Disabilities Act, you and I and these people that sit on this panel will get the job done. That's what a community is about. That's what we're talking about here today. Inclusive community. I said it earlier, and it will close again in saying, if we eliminate one person from our community, that does not make a community. It is inclusive, and the collaboration at this table is why we're here today. God bless all of you that came out today, and I thank you on behalf of the governor and his wife for coming out, and I want to acknowledge Attorney Noah Sachs, who's sitting in the back, because many of you don't know this. Attorney Sachs has been working diligently to make certain that all the violations against the government of the Virgin Islands, stand up, Noah. He has been working. Give him a round of applause, because it's the unsung heroes like Noah Sachs and Pam Tepper from the U.S. the Virgin Islands Department of Justice. Both of them are working together to close these cases and to make life better for all of us in our community. Thank you for being here today.
And on behalf of the moderator, myself, Clyde Rivers, and Archie Jennings, we want to thank the panelists. Thank you very much.
Cassie? This wraps up the morning session of the conference. And at this time, let me just ask you to give another round of applause to our panelists, ADA Territorial, ADA Coordinator Stephanie Barnes, Ms. Hewlett, and President of the Senate, President Malone. Just another round of applause, please. And we want to thank our moderators, Attorney Rivers and Attorney Jennings. Let's give them a round of applause.